welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And we are returning from our spoiler-free reaction last week when we got to see an early screening of Final Destination Bloodlines / the original Final Destination. We did back-to-back. We did our reactions at the time, a little short review with none of those spoilers, and now we're back to spoil all your fun.
We're going pants down, stick it in when it comes to Final Destination. You know, we're bearing all on the podcast.
And we're not going in that smooth door either.
We're not going in smooth. We're just going in.
We're coming in with friction.
We're going in dry. I mean, if you haven't, you know, if you do want it spoiler free and you want something a bit more tender, then we have done a spoiler free episode. You can go check it out, because people may accidentally click on this and they've already been exposed to some
mild spoilers.
Some mild spoilers.
I'm not going to say. I thought your segue there was going to be if you enjoy friction.
If you enjoy friction. We were going to say we've been exposed to some heinous imagery so far into the podcast, which is my perfect time to remind people to hit that subscribe button, because if you are a fan of heinous imagery and inappropriate discussions, as well as, you know, horror movies, then you should hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. I think we'll just get stuck straight into it.
We've talked about the friction. Now we're going to head on with this. So before we had done our reaction last week, there wasn't a whole bunch of reviews out yet. There was a couple of initial reactions. Some of them were fairly positive, so going into the film, but there wasn't a review. Now, based on our initial, if you listened to our spoiler free, and obviously if you haven't seen the film yet, then get out of here. Be gone.
Be gone.
Or death shall come for you, because you don't want to ruin all of the fun twists and turns that may be in this film. But also, weirdly enough, we are on the opposite side of pretty much the critics this time, where we are actually like not totally shitting on the film, but we definitely weren't like, I've seen like The Guardian gave it like a fucking 4-star review. And I was just like, The Guardian normally gives most horror films a 2-star review because they don't like horror films, but apparently this one was of higher caliber.
Yes, definitely higher caliber.
Review.
The sixth installment was of high caliber.
Yeah, many are talking of this being, you know, a reinvigoration of the franchise, and that the bloodlines are like the bloodline family aspect brings a completely new concept to the whole thing, and a lot of praise for the opening of the film, you know, which we both were highly praised that part of the film.
Yeah, it was good, and I think it was nice to watch a Final Destination in the cinema again. Yeah. We spoke about it when we were kind of, you know, having some din-dins before we watched the film. I believe you had a pizza. I had some southern fried chicken, if anybody cares. And we were saying, like, the first one, I think we both rented on home and VHS. Yeah. And then the second one, I think I got on DVD. And I think I
watched it on DVD.
You watched it on DVD. I think we both were able to see the third one in cinema kind of separately.
Yeah, snuck in.
Then we saw, you know, we managed to see them in cinemas. So I kind of feel like it was nice to go back to watch it, because it was quite, it was a big horror film of our generation. Final Destination. They always got people talking. So it was nice to go back and watch that and to get straight into it. So we will be talking about spoilers from now on. If you haven't watched it, go check our spoiler free. We were pretty good to avoid them, but in this episode we'll be talking about the deaths, the twists, all of that.
I think we were alright. I think we actually mentioned an entire death. Actually, we actually managed to mainly completely avoid it. And one thing is, obviously, like, because Final Destination, you know, although it was before a couple, you know, it was 2000 it started, you know, so technically it was before, you know, what then also became the other big franchises probably of our childhood, mainly probably were Final Destination, Saw and Paranormal Activity were probably the three big ones of the time.
Yeah, they were the big ones.
Of the ones that had repeated sequels and things like that, not like they're more standalone or just one-off sequels. And the one thing that normally, to be honest, I completely loved, you know, about Final Destination was obviously the inventive kills are a major fun part of it, but the fact that they were kind of just mainly like they weren't over the top on actual bogging down with a lot of the whole the law of death and stuff like that. When they really like try to overdo it, and for the most part, most of them, I'd say the second one probably has the highest amount of trying to like delve into a little bit more, but it's still but at that point in the franchise, it seemed like so this is making it feel different than the first one, and it kind of stood out. And also that one had incredibly inventive kills, incredible kills in that one. So all of that really worked together. So that one still had the thrillerish aspect to it that the first one kind of had, but it went away a little bit from just being like a teen horror and felt a little bit more like adult kind of ensemble kind of here to make a plot. The third one then kind of went back to dumbing it down a little bit. The fourth one was Donald Trump supporters. Yeah. And then the fifth one tried to do something kind of new with it. But again, it never felt like it took forever to really have to constantly like remind the audience of like that. Unlike, I would say, where you've got like the Saw franchise, which I felt kind of ran itself into a wall because of the amount of exposition and the amount of like trying to make a twist within like they overdid
too many twists,
and they then built such a confusing kind of story that it just died itself. Paranormal Activity. I'm not saying that one bogged itself down with extremely confusing things, but it just was a very one-note kind of franchise. It was
straight off the bat.
Whereas out of all of them, this was by far the funnest to watch, and definitely when you go to the cinema, this was the one that I would have like out of all of them been like, you want to see that in the cinema because it's just like
it's fun.
It is. You could go with friends and you'd really enjoy it. And I guess I think we'll come more to it later, but I think that was our main, that I found with this one, was a weird lack where I had fun in some moments, but it didn't consistently feel fun.
No.
And it felt somewhat bogged down by unfleshed out ideas. And obviously, we are here a week later. We have not seen the film again.
No.
We are still basing it on that original reaction. I will watch the film again. Like I'm still quite interested in seeing it again, to see whether I see it with fresh eyes. But this isn't that perspective right now. Right now, based on the original thoughts, I've had some time for them to settle in, to sit. Some things I'm a little bit more okay with, and some things I still think are just glaring things that stand out. Should we go for the opening of the film? The one bit that I do think stands out as an extremely stronger part of this film.
Yeah.
And what, to be honest, the majority of this whole new idea was basically based around, I'm assuming, this idea of this opening and this idea of what to do with it was the main thread that was like, oh yeah, so what if it is in the past and it actually runs through the family is the main thread,
Which is an interesting concept. And when I said this a lot of time, but there may be new listeners, but I never watch trailers. So I would say, unless I'm watching a film and a trailer comes on whilst we're there, like Clown in the Cornfield did for this, I won't see the trailer. So I didn't know how the plot line was going to work, anything like that. It opens up, and I think it's in 1960s or whatever.
Yeah, I think like 64. I think.
Yeah, and they're going to this kind of big sky lounge that kind of like a take on the
68,
take on that kind of like Seattle Sky Tower restaurant thing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, okay, how's this got to work? Because usually we're introduced to the central character, the one who's going to be having the premonitions, the one who's going to be kind of trying to solve the mystery. A lot of them do just boil down to the same thing. So I was wondering how it was going to work, but it was quite a bombastic opening in terms of scale of it.
It was, yeah. It felt like a lot of the money had gone into this opening. Like, it felt like they'd pumped some like extra cash into this. Not that at times, it's quite CGI heavy at times.
Yeah.
There are a few shots and stuff that don't look like amazing, but the main characters that we've got here. So we've got Iris and Paul, and they're both quite endearing. They go with this quite romantic little subplot. So it's quite nice to have this kind of this little like romance kind of scene, this kind of reveal that we have with her. You know, some of the character moments revealed within this, such as that she's actually pregnant and that they're, you know, he's taken her there to get engaged, but actually, you know, they go up to the restaurant up that Hugh Sky Needle, and he thinks he has a reservation and he doesn't, and it's awkward, but she doesn't actually care about any of that stuff. You know,
she's with child. You know?
She is, and it gives you quite a nice kind of moment. And to be honest, you know, the actress playing Iris, I was like, I'm actually very drawn in by you. Like, I could have watched more of you. To be honest, I could have watched more of your story. Like, I found their little like play quite interesting. Like, I quite liked the idea. It would have been interesting to almost see their story play out like in a film itself. You know, so you've got these things, and of course we've got little kind of teases of like the boy getting the coin out of the wishing well, which is bad luck. Obviously the elevator going up straight away, you're like, well, that's gonna be
that's not gonna go well, is it?
Yeah, and we've got this restaurant which does like flambe by you know people, and you've got a piano that's up on a high, and you know, and you've got a band on, and the dancers are all dancing on top of a glass floor. You know, I mean, whoever made this building did not make it very well, because one placing diamond chandeliers above glass, which is, you know, high, I assume high level, you know, not at all easy to break, but, you know, put the one thing that can break through. Like, what's the one thing that can not only break through metal, but could also possibly break through, you know, types of metal? Diamond. Let's put that above the glass. You know, that's a great choice.
They mentioned like, it's, you know, it opened early because it finished 5 months ahead of schedule. You know, and they're all fair.
And Iris is like, is that a good thing?
Is that a good thing? Like, I was thinking I wouldn't be telling people that. You know, like, we've got this great new thing called asbestos and lead paint. It's amazing.
Everyone should put it in their house.
Everyone should do it in their house.
Well, I guess at that time that was actually true. There's probably adverts of people literally going, get this amazing lead paint. Put your children in it.
And this fantastic microplastics.
You can drink it in one go.
It wasn't. It was pretty kind of laying it on thick about how shit's going to go down, but I liked it.
I mean, they always are. It's always like, you know, those kind of things. It's not, you know, I mean, I guess if we're thinking about the general of like, you know, a plane or a car traffic or a roller coaster, you know, at least it's, I guess, heights. You know, it's better than 4 when you've got like a freaking NASCAR race. Because that's my common every day, to sit in a car thing. That's one of my common fears whenever I go to NASCAR. So, you know, it's a very American one, that one, and a very region of Americanizing. You know, it wasn't a general, like, that was a problem, that one. You know, going across a bridge in the 5th one, you know, that's a perfectly, you know, but
I think a lot of people would do.
A worry for people kind of thing. You know, it didn't feel like hugely distant from the second one's idea of a car kind of thing. But
roller coaster, not so much, but it does happen every day.
But it's a common fear of people that that's going to happen. You know what I mean? That's one thing that was like a thread, and more that I think about with this one later, is that, you know, what makes this franchise, to be honest, like, not only fun but also that it fucks with people forever, is that majority of the time they really lean into stuff that is stuff that's actually like, I have got a fear of that. That is like you know, that is a fear of a way that I could easily actually die, and that's going to happen to me, kind of thing. You know, that's what made this franchise. You know, there's a reason people are still like, fuck going on a plane, or, you know, fuck, you know, fuck getting
going behind the logging.
The login one is by far the most standout of all.
That's
of them.
great.
The amount of times I literally, I have, I literally, possibly illegally, because I was coming to this episode, this is what I drove behind today. On the way back, I literally had it in front of me, and I was just like, die on the way to talking.
Die on the way to
the station.
It stops you. Because we get a lot of logging, you know, logging things here, but we also get, you know, the car transportations where you have 8 or 10 cars on the back of a lorry, and you're thinking like, I could see those fucking things bouncing around.
Whenever you're like behind one of them, you just think that is just going to like drop off onto me, isn't it? Like, you're just going to crush me in one damn go. Yeah, so like all of those things, but like by far the ones in this franchise that people will remember death-wise are the ones that really do like link to everyday life. You know, there are many great deaths. There are some amazing ones, but there are some that are just like, I've walked by and actually had that in my head, kind of thing. And absolutely heights, and there's lots of people who have gone up high things that have got
Same,
a lot of
like,
these,
fucking
you know,
high things.
when you're like there, and there are times when I've been up heights and the idea of even like touching or going next to the glass is like a fuck that, and especially when it is. I remember going up the Eiffel Tower and, you know, a couple of other places with the similar thing, but I remember going to the Eiffel Tower and walking across, and Charlotte just walked across the bit where it had the glass, and I literally stopped and I actually had to rev my brain up to walk across it because I was like, fuck that. I just looked out. I don't know why, but yeah, that is one of mine, you know. And this is, you know, so this one I think does have a better, like, more conceived, you know, it might be out in the history books and it might be in the past, but it's still like a glass floor on a building, things like that.
But I think it was a good return one as well, because you think Final Destination has been MIA for maybe 10 years or so, and you're kind of wondering, well, how can you build something a bit fresher? And I know that when we were speaking, like, one of the ideas they were bouncing around was like emergency services. And you're thinking, okay, so is it going to be like some kind of fire, or are they going to lean into like another like pile up on a motorway or something like that? So I think to come back with something quite grand in scale is good. And I also found it really interesting, and I guess this does lead into the whole concept and why it's taking so long for, you know, our main characters to kind of come into it. But is that everybody survives. Usually it's a small sect of people who survive. And this time pretty much everybody survives, which is why I was thrown off at this point, because I was like, surely she gets out, and the young child, who's very obviously Tony Todd's character, surely they get out and everybody else dies. But no, lo and behold, everybody is saved. You know, she prevents it, and she kind of becomes a bit of like a hero almost. Yeah,
because it's one of those ones where normally you get the aftermath. As in, like, she saves it and then it still all collapses down or blows up. But that's not actually here. Happen, no. That is the kind of slight difference we get here is, you know, once, you know, and we'll go on that, but once we go back, we just flash forward to basically the family member in the future kind of thing. So we don't get that kind of what actually happened next. We don't really get to see that part either. We just get to hear about that kind of part next. Which is again a change for the franchise, where normally you're used to them getting off and then the plane explodes and then they react to that, or they get off and the highway, you know,
the highway still happens,
or the roller coaster crashes, you know. So they're used to being out there, and then normally there's a character who just happens to be like one who survived, but actually then still gets somewhat picked off, or your best friends were in there. So that's normally the emotional resonance within this film, is actually my friend was left behind, or my friends are still there, or they all got on the plane and I didn't, or I sent them back on the plane, you know, all those kind of ones that we've had in those other ones. So that part, the emotional resonance this time, is more replaced with the idea that it's like close to home, not just random people spread around. You know, not that they didn't have families and members in that. You know, we had a son who was mother watched her son get literally crushed by glass in one of the amazing deaths in Final Destination 2. You know, things like that. Like, we had some of those kind of cool ones. So some of the like in the actual premonition, the actual kills, though, you know, some of the ones that we get, you know, they come pretty once we get going with the glass. The diamond hits the glass, and, you know, the crack begins, and we've got the band and stuff like that. So we kind of get the glass smashing to start with. We've got the little shit of a boy who literally throws that. Who's literally told, like, if you throw that penny off this height, you literally could, like, basically go straight through someone's head like a bullet, like, kind of thing. But he's like, fuck it. Throws it. You know, it gets, like, basically, like, jammed up inside the thing, which causes, like, the ventilation to add an extra layer of this could all go bang. So we get the glass smashes. It doesn't take long for the now fiance to basically
him to get off.
You know, we got some cool details there. Paul is like holding on, but his hands are literally getting sliced into the glass, you know. So it added a little kind of part of that, you know. They've just got together and now, you're dead. We've got, I believe, a Guinness World Record in this film for the oldest woman ever set on fire. So the woman, like the stunt woman who did it, is apparently the oldest woman to ever be set on fire.
How old is she?
I mean, set on fire to live. I'm sure there are many others who are not alive to get that reward of Guinness Book of World Records.
and that's one that we're dedicated to beating.
Yes, we are going to burn someone and make sure they live.
Burn an old person and make sure they live.
I'm sure it counts if they're horribly burnt.
Yeah.
You've got the woman running through there. You've got the when obviously you get the explosion, the elevator one. So the snooty guy who are holding the reservations. Who is there at the thing? That reminds me because we're going to do American Psycho, and there's several parts now about the snooty guys making reservations at restaurants. Yeah. So I don't know why. When I saw that scene, because I just read American Psycho, in my head it was just as if Patrick Bateman was stood behind him, for fuck's sake, getting laughed at by him. But I love this scene. He acts so high and mighty, and then the second it's we're trying to get all the people onto this elevator. It's just wait for the next one and we can get down and you can come back up. And then when that elevator drops, was great. When he gets literally sliced in half,
it was great
by trying to stay on there. And
a lot of gore in this film is really well done.
Yeah, it is. There is some really good gory scenes. This opening is full of bloody scenes.
Yeah.
When it's when we get the explosion and several people are then blown up. Blown off.
Some people getting blown off.
And then the whole thing, tilts. You've got the whole, where the woman is taken down, and then the piano.
Yeah, then
you get that kind of we saw that coming, but here it goes, and moving down, and she gets splattered. And then we also get the nice comeuppance of the boy below.
Yeah,
and he's like, I'm out. Because he made it to the stairs, even though several people were killed by the stairs basically disappearing. But he was the only one on the other side. Gets to the bottom and literally smashed and smushed.
It's great.
Not only do you get it landing on him, but you get a slide of his parts.
Yeah.
And it look, it looks cool. It's probably where we've got that high level of, I'd say this definitely feels possibly though at the same time where we've got, apart from the fourth one, we've got a major first one which I'd say really has not got as much practical, I think, as the previous ones had. We are fully into, we can make this look real with CGI kind of thing, and it does work for the most part.
For the most part, it looked really good.
It's always my thought in my head when it comes to those ones with CGI where we've got because I know Final Destination 5 was actually quite practical in a lot of its scenes and stuff. The gymnast that was all practical and stuff so it could you look back and it holds up. And there's quite a lot of ones in the original in 2001 where I was they all look fake because they actually were practical. I always wonder with those ones because the amount of CGI ones, but then you look back at it 5 years later and you're fucking hell.
Yeah, it's
it looked, and it's just that I was looking at some of these scenes and being I'm not judging it for them what will come, but there were already scenes where I was I can tell that's CGI. I just wonder what it'll look down the line. That smushed boy will look weirdly fucking hell, what's that?
Yeah, he looks like fucking Jar Jar Binks.
It's not in every. There is some scenes that I do believe were more practical in this, but some of them were just so obviously not that it that was one of my bugbears at a certain points. But in this opening scene, because it's so chaotic and there's so many fast shots and stuff like that, it just overall works. When she goes beyond the premonition and she starts going back in and starts literally putting out the fires of the plate and starts moving things away and getting things out of the way and stuff like that, and making sure that everyone stops on the dance floor, and you see that she's kind of stopping and you're okay, there are still little parts of death where where you've got your first instance of the way that they show the air used, again a very big thing in the original film, the air being used, but in this opening scene it's not so obvious, but later on it's used in an extremely kind of weird way at times.
And it's odd because it kind of, we watched the first one before and there is this visual effect that's never really used again in any of the other ones, and it's almost like Death has this kind of physical presence where there will just be a kind of a darkness shift into the scene temporarily, and some of the clients, sorry, still in work, but some of the, I was about to say some of the patients then as well, some of the victims will notice it, particularly the ones I'm thinking of are Todd and the teacher. Though they look,
you had that slight early CGI, oddly not overused. It wasn't enough to ruin the scenes, but you had a weird visual shadow effect behind them.
And they don't bring that in in any of the other ones, as far as I can recall.
The fact that they also take back.
With
Todd's death, where the water so he purposely makes it look like a suicide, which the other ones don't try.
No, they don't try it. But in this one, they do seem to bring in that thing of like death is a physical.
Yeah, because the original also had a lot of wind, like a lot of the wind blows in and they feel something, And it's not they didn't like the other ones had different ways of premonitions and stuff, but yeah, this one has like the wind being there, but it also
isn't there.
It isn't there, but it's also like the wind's more like contained to areas.
Yeah.
in a weird way, it feels more like it's like the wind's after me, and we're getting onto like Mark Wahlberg and The Happening. Like, shit, the wind's chasing me.
The wind's after me. Yeah.
It was a weird one where I remember every time the wind in this film, like when we get to the the old cabin with with Iris when she's like grown up, the way the wind was used as if it's like I can be perfectly protected here, it can't get me here because the second I step outside, wind.
The wind
like literally there, and it's only in this one area. Like they step for a gate, now there's the wind, and it's like the execution that part really weird. Man. It took me out of it for a moment to be like, what?
Well, I felt that
it doesn't work like this.
I felt that with a lot of it. I had this weird kind of relationship with the film throughout it, where at some points I was like, we're back, like this is Final Destination. The bit that I'm thinking of specifically is because I think tonally the film's a bit all over the place as well, but is Howard's death. So they're visiting and they're having like drinks in the back garden kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we at this point we don't know because there hasn't been an accident and we can spot who dies when, so we know what the order is.
Yeah.
And there's a massive shard of glass that goes in with all of the ice, and it's getting scooped into these cups.
Yeah.
And you have this moment where you're like, "Fuck, who's got this ice?" And it's a massive shard.
A really good like tense. Every day. The idea of a glass in your drink or glass in your food. Everyone's broken like a glass in a
so
room
many times
or smashed it, and you've just been like. But did I get it all?
Did I
definitely get it all? Like,
what's this out? Am I fucked?
Yeah, or
will I die?
Am I literally go? Yeah, I literally have this, or like that's just smashed next to that, and fucking hell, like should I just get rid of this, or do I risk it? And I mean, most of the time you risk it.
Most of the time you risk it.
Well, I'm not throwing that all away. I can eat around some glass.
Is a whole cottage pie.
It's not going to do that much damage to my intestines.
Yeah. It's only
it's only going to partially rip apart.
You've only got to be wrong once.
Yeah,
that's odds that I'm fine taking. But that was a really good moment, and you had you had the kids jumping on the trampoline, and there's a rake underneath.
Yeah,
and you've got
the lawnmower's set up in a kind of way.
Set up, and you've got Howard kind of like you've got a whole bunch of characters who are about to take a
barbecue.
Drink,
just a little wink to the end of Final Destination 2 with the barbecue and the drinks on the side, and the bottle's like shifting like it's going to fall off onto something.
But you have loads of characters who have gathered, and they're all about to take a drink, and somebody calls them, so they speak to them or they put their drink down.
Yeah.
So it teases that really well, and I felt like this was that. Kind of a little bit closer to that vintage Final Destination where like all this horror.
This was the fun this was the fun airy part of the film when we first not that we get like Stephanie, we get introduced to her at college and she's flunking out and things like that, so you're like okay, so this is a new way to like do it. We don't automatically the idea of the order of everything and stuff works really well, So this is when the film is still like, it's building off of that opening and it's feeling really, this could be, a little bit different. I'm not saying completely different, and I wasn't expecting completely different, but we've got this, set up, the idea of the nightmares and stuff like that, so we don't really know any order of why this is happening and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to work that out later. So that's fine. Okay, we'll get to that. So obviously that leads her to she comes back and she's estranged from her family, isn't she?
Yeah.
Not estranged, but there's a lot. Her mum disappeared when they were young. We get like very quick kind of thing. Her brother's not really interested because he feels like for the last few years she's gone off to college and not really tried.
That she's left now as well.
And Dad came down and I was like, your dad seems so gay. I don't know why he came down. And I was like, did Mum leave because Dad's gay?
You got
he seems a bit gay. I got a gay vibe.
I thought he was just a and he's done well for himself chap,
and basically she goes straight into like, I'm here, and by the way, I'm gonna completely fuck up your day because I'm gonna ask about Iris, what was the grandmother, and I don't know, but like I guess you
have to go.
Howard might know something about this, but actually no, don't bring it up to Howard because that's gonna piss him off, so don't do that. And of course she goes over and she brings it up with Howard, and everyone's pissed off with each other, and like, why the fuck would you bring this up? And and
she was a crazy old kook. She was weird,
fucking mad, and went like that. Which exactly what again, thinking about extending that in Final Destination, that one scene in the original when he's he's in the hiding himself off, and you got and again that was mentioned in sequels that's what he did afterwards, that he went and hid himself off, and we even get this psychiatric ward with the original with Ale Lauter, who came back in the sequel, Clear Rivers, who came back and said she basically locked herself in a psychiatric ward just so that she could be like, there's nothing unsafe in one of those rooms. This is all ground, that is established within the franchise. The idea that how the hell do you do it, and basically trying to close yourself off and just keep yourself in. So you're like, you haven't met Iris in the future yet, so you're just like, okay, this all seems perfectly, this all sounds interesting. Let's get onto that. There's a little bit of a mystery here about like what's Iris and what's going on with the family, to get past all that bit, and then it's like, we have a little thing. The aunt helps her find a little bit of information, so she can find Iris. So we're going to meet her. But first, we got to have that barbecue. We're going to have this barbecue.
Iris dies first because.
Of course she does.
This is where
this is the start of. She does. She goes to.
She's thinking, why the fuck am I getting these? Why am I having this weird dream about my fucking grandmother dying? Like, imagine if that's a dream you were having.
Linking to the what other dreams did she Did she live her whole life?
Like what the fuck?
It's I had dreams of getting ploughed by my by my great grandfather.
It was banging. He was putting in an absolute fucking stint. He was going
just like that. It's just like she's having the ones of Iris in this horrible thing, and then like one of the other cousins is like, that's so weird. I had this dream of our granddad. I didn't want to talk about it, but basically he was banging.
He was fucking banging.
It was so good. But obviously banging. It's my granddad, so I don't know.
So I only beat off once,
But then the brother's like, I had the same one.
So I need to fucking put this clipper down. It's going to be all over the episodes. I apologise for that. So we then find out that the granddad then kind of died in an accident, and that because she stopped this, that these people were never supposed to live. So death has been going around and taking
hundreds of different timelines sparring off, hundreds of trees that need to be pruned.
Yeah, it is just good work. And then eventually, she leaves the cat. She gives her this book, and she's like, "It's all in there." Yeah. And then as soon as she leaves.
And the family, like the Uncle Howard, is just like how horrible it was to grow up with someone who's just constantly
thought we were going to die,
and we get implication that was part of the childhood that her mother had, who we haven't met yet.
It's very Halloween 2018, isn't it?
I mean, it was one of we are in a kind of a period of 10 years where we are getting this idea of almost like. We go back to some kind of a matriarch of not that she is, Iris isn't, but and it's a weird one where it worked with Halloween because it was goddamn earned. And we had the one and this one, sadly for me, I'm not saying that it's like of that level, because I'm not trying to be like, this is someone who should be, they've only built this into this film, this one major of that. Building up to meeting this Iris of who is now what's she like now, what's she going to be?
Yeah.
But she gave me, when we meet Iris, gave me more So less Laurie Strode of Halloween 2018 and more of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre one that we got, of the Netflix one.
Yeah.
Of the one where it's like, you're not the same actress. You don't seem at all related or linked, and you're acting in a very odd...
Yeah.
You know, it just feels... I don't know. The acting, I didn't love older Iris's acting. I found it very cringy at times.
I didn't like the whole...
I didn't like the whole setup. I thought that it was dumb. I thought it was too dumb.
Dumb as fuck. It was this thing of like, she should have been... I know that they...
I like the ideas coming off of it.
Yeah, I like the ideas, and I like the concept, because like I said, Joe, in our spoiler-free one, I respect them for trying something different, because if it had been a Final Destination film and it had been, there's something that happens, somebody sees it and prevents it, and you know it happens, people die, and then one by one they're prevented, and then X, Y, blah, fucking Z. We've covered the Final Destination films, cheap plug, go and check them out, and we felt a lot of fatigue by the third, fourth one, and I imagine
it's that same order.
It's the same order.
It happens, premonition, then it happens, then they get over it a little bit, then they move on, then they work out the order, then they try to survive the order, then most of the time they probably die anyway.
Yeah, and you're kind of like, if that had happened, we'd probably be saying, well, it wasn't fresh enough, you know, you could just watch the other ones. So I respect that they tried something different, and I conceptually I quite like it. But I feel like the execution wasn't there. And going back to this kind of elderly version of Iris, they sell her as being this kind of like really kooky, like dangerous, maybe you shouldn't go for her.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe they should have leaned into it a bit more, because instead we basically do get like the Aldi version of Laurie Strode. She's built this compound for some reason, as if Death's got to see like some stakes in the ground to be like, oh, I can't do that. Or gates and be like, oh,
that's what I mean.
And then she's also got like,
you assume
like
wood,
like a
keep
wood,
people
like
out,
like a hunt, like a, you know, they have those like hunting gilets on. She's got like one of those on.
Again, she's dressed like Laurie Strode in 2018. So like the same way that so it was in Texas Chainsaw, like they all dressed oddly similarly to each other. It's like you've just taken that.
I'm a survivalist.
I am the survivalist. Yes, this is what I am. But
and then she fucking steps out of her.
There was no to the idea that you're this person who, you know, you can build into, have done it all these ways. But there was no nuance to her being extremely clever and stuff like that. And it also it links to like the, you know, the concept of the actual Bloodlines thing, you know, and this part needed to happen for that to work, you know. And like you said about all the setup, you know, we've got a million weather vanes, a million bloody wind chimes, as if wind is the way to always detect them, which is taking from the original. It's taking one of the plot points and taking it in like the worst way you can take it, because it literally boxes off the idea that, oh, this is the only secure place. When you go into the house and you're like, this isn't like like even in the second one when she said about a mental facility and having power, you know, cornered off walls. That is a legitimately, this is legitimately a safe room. Walking into this house, I'm like, fuck off. There's so many things that will kill you, and the idea that death ain't going to come through your door. I was just like, that was I think people of like the franchise, like the way of death and working and stuff like that, I just felt it was a bit almost insulting to be a bit like, really?
He's good.
He can't, in all this time, she's managed to completely avoid like beating those, you know, he almost gets her in the moments when we're in there with the guy, and I know it's like clever, like the light goes onto the thing and we're like, oh, here we are, you know, and things like that, and she's like, oh, I've caught you out, you know, I've stopped that one little bit, and it's just like, because in every other one it was that easy. It was that easy to just prune off a part of it and it not to then like have anything kind of happen.
Setup. It felt so lazy.
And then we get the one thing in this film that is constantly brought up and yet never really actually fully explained or fully actually how the hell it works or how we actually get the book.
Oh man,
the book is constantly in her hand and constantly shown off, and it has random drawings that link to the franchise and random parts of how she's like worked out how some deaths might happen, even how her death in a moment happens.
Yeah,
you know, it's even there. We see her literally there as if she knows exactly the thing, and she's just keeping all of these things at bay. Okay, fair enough. This book stays throughout the whole film as if it's explaining, when if you look at the book as well, it doesn't look like you're going to get, you know, what the fuck are these drawings?
It's the scrawlings of a
what
mad
the hell does, like, it literally is the scrawlings of a mad person. Again, why probably putting her in a mental facility would have made a lot more sense.
A lot more sense.
You know, at least we could be like, okay, so we're following these. This book then replaces basically the premonitions within the film, you know.
And I feel like, just whilst we're on that, I feel we're going to make the same point as well, with me cutting in rudely. I feel like each of the Final Destinations had, apart from the fourth one, had a fun little way that it teased, like, this is what to look out for. This is it. I remember the second one. There's something like there's like a man with hook for hands. You're like, oh god, and then
she keeps having like these visions, you know, which is like works
it's
really
fun
well.
way of doing it. And then you've got the photographs of the third one, which I liked.
I really like that one, yeah.
And in this one, it feels like it's only ever comes up in the one part where they think Eric's gonna die, and they're kind of following him as he's walking along the street, and she's like, look, that's gotta go, like. One of these.
Well, she's almost implied to have some kind of a slight, like, she's got the book, but now she's also got a gift.
Well, I think
work those out,
like pattern recognition. Yeah, I think she's
used the book, I believe, to help her find almost patterns, and now she's looking for every pattern, you know, and things like.
But it never comes out again. I feel like that's never used, and I feel like the premonitions never happened. Like when, you know, I'm trying to think of. I'm thinking of all the.
It feels like it's that's what I mean. It feels like it's slightly done, and then not.
Yeah.
And the problem, like that for me was a somewhat like you're saying is a problem, because it's like you're not fully fleshing out this idea of this book when this is the main, you know, thing. At least the other ones, and simply, and we didn't have to keep going on about them either. It happens. This happens. Yes, I've got to get other people on board with this.
Yeah.
She still has to. The thing is, like, a lot of these things as if we are doing it in a new, interesting way. The only problem is, it feels like everything that has already been done in the franchise is still right here.
Yeah.
And we have to just take a way more exhaustive process to get to the point of it. The premonitions, we have to keep talking about the book and looking at the book or looking at the patterns, but it never feels like it's actually that useful. She has to find out the pattern. And we have to go through that by her going again for a very long process to get there. So it's not really anything new in those parts. It is just like a longer conversation or a longer moment for her to finally get to it. And because everything is larger this time in Bloodlines, everything takes longer to explain.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a drag at times for that reason.
It is. It kind of feels like there are some moments that are fun, like the bit, you know, you get Eric in the tattoo shop, which it's fun to watch, but then doesn't really make much sense when you actually think about it.
Yeah,
because you're like, oh, he's supposed to die, like this is his death.
Yeah,
and then and it's quite well done. It's
a really good scene. It was that was the whole trailer. That whole scene was in the trailer.
Oh wow!
Like literally, that was the first trailer for this film. Was that scene? Complete scene was that
really
making people assume that they've just seen how he died. You know, so throwing people off.
Yeah,
you know,
and then he escapes, and then kind of later on you find out that he's not actually Howard's son, which was a good fun twist.
For why he didn't die, you know.
Yeah.
So again, like most people have even like in the spoiler one, a lot of people probably would have already seen that kind of scene. But that's, you know, that whole like play up in that scene, you know, with him then dropping basically into fire. But you're like, that's a lot of goddamn fire. I don't like. There was enough fire to engulf him that it wasn't just like, oh, my leather jacket saved me. It was like, nah, you don't have any burns around your hair. You've got long hair, and your hair went straight to fire. You know, that leads to questions as well. But the scene itself, at least, was like fun. You know, this whole scene with Iris is not fun.
No.
And I also didn't really like the death, because not only was it clearly signposted to us. There was no playfulness to us. There was no fun. It weirdly just felt like we got a really nice snapshot of Iris at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then we've got this one who I guess it, for reasoning feels so distant from her. And then we get this really gratuitous death for her.
Yeah.
Where I just feel, you've got to see it to make the point. Which is like, okay, you've got to see it to make the point.
Yeah, makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. But, also at the same time, you spent all of this time to try and survive, so this never happens, and you've just unleashed it on your entire family.
Yeah, you've just done
it just to make a point. You've done it when you could go back into that cabin, shut the fuck up, and maybe see what happens if you just naturally die.
Well, she's got cancer.
It might happen. Yeah, she's
wait
got
until
cancer.
you're dead, man.
What happened? Like, we don't actually know what happens if someone just naturally dies of a natural cause and makes it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For all you know, that was how you broke the curse, but instead, you got to see it to make it happen. Bang!
I'll doom you all.
It's like, all right, okay, yeah, but logistically thinking it through, and I know Final Destination films, so they don't all need this much thought. But I think that the other ones actually had more thought to a lot of it, by keeping it simple. And this one almost overcomplicates it, and therefore actually makes a lot of ideas that I do think it might be a lot of fun on first watch, but I think people who like the franchise will rewatch it and go like, what? Actually, I did I was having fun at the time, but now I don't know if I'm just pre-synced, and I don't know if a lot of this is affected by the fact we watched the original film and then watched this one. And I just think that one is so much more logically sound in majority of the film compared to what we get here. And so much better executed in many of the scenes, many of these kind of scenes. Not the death scenes, I mean the actual interactions between characters, the ideas, the somewhat simplicity, by also adding in some interesting ideas that are used. So she gets the weather vane through the face, traumatizes her, her great-granddaughter or granddaughter, whatever she is. Great-granddaughter, isn't it?
Granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
Yeah, traumatizes her granddaughter and dooms the bloodline. And
dooms the entire bloodline by setting off basically what we now find out. This was a really long way to get back to Howard. But yeah, basically this is now set off in a chain of events. I'm not going to go for it. There is a long scene where Stephanie reads all the books, looks at all the things, works out a kind of a bloodline-like thing, and basically gets to the point of, here's the order, So we go through
Howard's dead by this point.
He is dead by this point. But I just feel like this is the exposition scene that we kind of just need to get out of the way to be like, that's it. They are through there. They are, each family member links off and basically in family order, and firstborn, and then kills off all the firstborn children. I did think it would be firstborn, then the sister, basically you're born, then you're born, and then but it goes through each one. I would have just thought, in my head I was thinking more like, surely it's just like she was born and now you need to die because you're the next living, next one born, and then whoever out of his family is the next one born, and then we'll be jumping across here, won't we?
Yeah.
But instead, for some reason, it's firstborn and all of his children that come off of that, and then the original, and then all of that, because death doesn't go in age order. He goes in family bloodlines.
Convince him to become a sperm donor.
So back to yes, I've kind of skipped ahead there. This is after their mourning, Howard, but the one thing I enjoy about this opening, as we've already talked about the glass and the setup, and and the mum comes back, and the mum somewhat notices these patterns that the Howard doesn't, having the same years of training by the mother that she does, but he doesn't. He's pushed all of that out of his mind. The mum is more seems to still be stuck in that cycle a little bit. She notices a lot of these things because she removes the rake and spots a few of the things. He moves the bottle off the side, the barbecue, that Eric is being just going for it. He doesn't really give a shit. He's not scared of death.
No, he's not. He's just doing it.
The thing I like about this is, again, not that this is specifically the way, but I'm sure a lot of people who have used the lawnmower have thought, shit, whenever I'm doing it with mine, because I have an electric lawnmower, and it constantly stops because the grass gets jammed up under the blade.
Yeah.
So I have to open the back bit, move it out, and then pull the grass clump out to move it forward. And every single time I do that, I think, this is electric powered. There's no other thing. I have to. There's a safety issue. I have to press a button and thing to make it start.
Of course.
But it's just like
but
that.
You never know.
But you're just thinking like, what if it didn't? I'm just assuming that this just fully has fully like gone off because it's done. But if it doesn't, my hand just goes to a chop. I'm not saying how it gets, which is slicing through the back of your skull and then slicing over your head. But
it's not going to be far from it.
At least this one is a thing that is a somewhat links to a common fear, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's it's a good setup, like I said.
I think, but my one thing is that I feel like this is the one that links to a common fear, and then after this, it goes away from that common fear. It goes to a lot of out there things, which are cool I'm not saying they're not cool concepts, but it was one thing that actually this week came to me, but because I was just reflecting on the deaths and stuff like that. And I was going, the thing I love about the other ones is the fact that slip in the bathtub. First one, slip in the bathtub. Things like that. Hit by a bus, crossing the street. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A bit of shrapnel coming off of something. Could happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a more common fear, but it was still like okay. Tanning beds, not for me. I'd die just by stepping into it. My ginger skin would burn to a crisp straight away. The same way yours would if you stepped into a church. And I think Final Destination 2's probably got it for the best of like really leading into this. You've got not only the car stuff, yes, but you've got like
the lift,
the glass dropping down, and even like a little bit of a play with the dentistry kind of part. You've got the lift, getting your head caught between that. Those kind of things. And several other really like kind of cool deaths. But there's a lot of ones that do kind of there's a few more setup ones, but there's a lot of ones that do play into like common fears and stuff like that, or things happening in the everyday. Even Final Destination 5 has a lot of like, that's just stuff that you're doing, a daily thing that people do all the time, and it turns into that. And they remembered that almost that is the thing that keeps people like actually almost of this film that can almost give people nightmares, is actually the fact that they're just like, I thought about this a million times, but I never would have thought,
Yeah, that's a Final Destination movie.
That's a Final Destination movie, and the opening leads into that, and this lawnmower death leads into that.
Yeah.
I would say though, I do feel like Eric's piercing one, not that, but I'm saying getting your piercing caught in something, that first one is kind of it. But I think a lot of the other deaths we get here are things that are kind of just like, wouldn't it be cool? I even know that this happened, so wouldn't it be cool if this happened to them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But less so that it's like a lot of them where you're there like, this is never going to happen to someone. Like, no. This doesn't feel like something to happen, or it doesn't feel like set up to happen to someone, So building on that, so then there's so soon after this is Julia's death. So we get the Eric fake out.
Yeah.
And that's cool. As we said, that's one of the stronger scenes. It feels, just like the other, like most of this, apart from the Iris scene so far, that's the bit that kind of threw me off a bit.
Yeah.
And then this bit kind of brings it back, and Eric's feels, and this feels very traditional.
It feels very Final Destination. Yeah. Everything's kind of interlinking with each other.
Yeah, and again, it all falls onto those common fears, and those common things that, quite often, not that every single death in Final Destination does, fall into that, but they're normally the most interesting and the fun ones, and the ones that skew too far away from like a standard thing, I think, are the ones that sometimes the weaker ones.
Yeah.
So we get Julia's death here.
Yeah.
So this is the one that you've already referenced by saying, so we've had Eric's, and Eric is surprisingly alive, and it's kind of a funny little kind of side bit.
It's a funny little twist.
And Eric is quite a fun character, to be honest.
He's probably the best character in the film.
He probably is. So, he's the most fun. He's the most, he's actually somewhat the most fleshed out character, to be honest. Even more than probably our lead here.
Yeah.
He's, a gay way of fun, and he's having fun with them. We even get the old original bus, hitting with the garbage, trash, whatever you call it, vehicle coming by that you're thinking, wait a sec, it looks like he's about to get the old splattered in the road kind of thing. So he keeps having these bits, which causes a kind of a main of us constantly picking out like, oh look, there's lots of things, and why am I blanking on the lead's name? I just said it before. Is it Capri? No.
Stephanie.
Stephanie is there obviously now fully into the idea of the bloodline, things like that, and that he is the next logical one to die. Before they know the twist we've already mentioned, that he's not actually Howard's son. So it still feels like a very like convoluted thing that I've got to say in order to make it clear about how he gets
a little convoluted.
So we get this cool, with Stephanie pointing out, the boys could kick that ball, that could, smack into someone's head and they'd fall into that, what is it, the blower, that, the guy,
the leaf blower,
that would cause a kind of chain reaction that could then lead someone
to... The kid kicks the ball in someone's face and they go into the road.
Not to that, and then splat or something like that kind of thing. And and Eric's taking the piss out of her, and that's not going to happen. And the brother's just kind of following along. Charlie, I think the brother is. He's just following along, like, what's going on.
Do the Charlie work.
And we get Julia, who's going out for a run, and she's kind of got a bit of a. She's not in this film for very long. We get a slight like. Her and Stephanie used to be best friends, really close, but now they're not, kind of thing, and that's kind of soured her to like this idea, and she's not really going with any of this. She's like, this just sounds so stupid, And this one is a weird mixed one for me, because I somewhat like the kind of humour. I like the humour of the setup for this one, and I do like the kind of the way it plays out. This still feels kind of fun, and we're playing with it, So Julia runs down the road behind them while they're still worried about Eric, and like kind of last minute they kind of somewhat go, oh, wait a second, like how's this work? But you see basically everything they just said. Lawnmower thing, blows it towards the kid knocked the ball smacks her in the head, she goes into the trash, into the bin, and then she's lifted up and thrown into the trash compactor. Now, I guess the idea that you could end up in a trash compactor sounds absolutely terrifying.
Oh, of course.
Not so. I can't say that falls within a common like.
It's not an everyday.
I'm gonna get thrown in the trash compactor.
It's not an everyday fear, but it's like the thought of being crushed to death is terrifying.
That's the bit that's the idea that you're going to get like crushed down is like fucking horrible. So they all rush. They can't get the guy in the van to listen because he's on his like headphones. And just not listening or anything, which I just find really weird. The idea, and I guess this is America, but the idea that you've got this with just one person driving the whole thing and setting it up. No one else is there to like keep an eye or think about. I was like, okay, but she's in there. Stephanie manages to get onto the top of it and manages to get to it while the other two are like basically trying to stop it, and it goes where it goes expected it to go. Julie gets her hand up to Stephanie and then it crushes her, and we get
smushes her head.
We get a smush on the head, and the whole thing, it's quick, it's fun, it's a quick death, it falls as that, and again, that's fun. It's a fun one. I didn't like the CGI. I thought it looked. I didn't like the way when her head crushes. I thought it just looked like a weird blob of like
balloon. It's like a Star Wars.
It just looked really odd. It didn't give like the arm coming off is lovely effect. But that part, the way her head goes into this weird computerized blob. I just thought
it looks a bit out of there.
It looks a bit out. It happens quickly. It's a character that we barely got to know. It's sad for the family. They're another one dead. They've lost Howard and now they've lost Julia. Mum obviously is completely distraught, but still no one's really completely believing any of this stuff. That Stephanie's trying to tell them. So again, we're now hitting similar territory. No one's really. We've got the characters who are like, yes, I'm believing you, and we've got the characters who are like,
this is dog shit.
Normally we then have to follow these different characters into different places, but obviously they're pretty much all together. So we start, we've got the safe characters, anyone who's not in Iris's bloodline, so who's not there. So the aunt is fine, Stephanie's dad's fine, those ones are fine, and Eric, it turns out, is apparently fine because he's
the illegitimate child of some neighbour.
Which
is a good twist.
It's a good twist. It was a good twist on the thing that actually he's not fake, and it works well with Eric's character. It works. It's quite funny for the character.
Now this is kind of the part where I was enjoying the film up to this point, mainly because I feel like the deaths 2 out of 3 deaths so far kind of nailed the Final Destination vibe a little bit. I was feeling that it was, you know, the story was definitely getting a bit convoluted, but it's this part kind of going forward where I really felt like the wheels fell off. So we go and, you know, they find out that there's another survivor called JB, who is, you know, the kind of the last survivor left. And they go and pay him a visit, and obviously it turns out to be Tony Todd's character, William Bloodworth.
Yeah.
And it was obviously going to be, you know, Tony Todd.
They're having the young,
And I think this split us, didn't it? Because I didn't like this.
The thing is that there's 2 ways my brain works with this plot twist. So I think that retconning the way that he's introduced in the original film and then in the sequel, and yes, he pops up in the 5th one for a moment. He's not really. He is an ominous guy in the original who is just talking about death. He doesn't specifically. He talks about death's plan, but in a very kind of loose way that he doesn't quite know. And then by the second one, he talks about it, but somewhat you're a little bit like, oh, he knows about this because he's seen this happening now, you know. And he might have seen it happening later, but he's almost. I like the fact that he is almost played like he is almost some kind of entity of death.
Well, that's kind of what
an extension in the real world, you know. And that's the way most people have seen him, almost as a form of death, you know.
Well, that was the whole idea behind the fan theory, very much, was that, you know,
he's just there to tell them the rules, but he's just collecting, and he's not really, you know, death is, you know, omnipresent in his approach there, but he is kind of that, a form of him kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this one retcons that. And says that actually he knows all about this because he is the one of the original survivors of this planet, even though it's death. So technically, this could go back, you know, to the evolution of man, or back to monkeys.
Yeah, and,
I want the Final Destination monkey.
The Final Destination monkey movie. Yeah, they're having these
the monkey premonition.
Yeah, and they just can't do it. But what would be
that's the next, like the rise of the apes.
The branch they're on breaks, and they just fall to their deaths.
Yeah,
and then it's all like one falls and snaps his neck on a vine.
Think about the bloodline from that though.
The
evolution of the original man. Just all of the fucking just like it's like
all shag as much as they can.
Like fucking saying Adam and Eve, and then one of them has a premonition survives. Like we're all fucked.
Yeah, fucking hell, we're gone. But yeah,
that's how death started.
But well, shouldn't death have come for him next after Iris? If it's working its way through the chain, shouldn't it have gone for Iris, William Bloodworth, and then Iris's kids?
Well, I guess it's actually that they kill Iris and kill all of her, so they wipe out her bloodline, and then they go to the next one. I think that's why it's saying it took so long for everyone.
Okay.
You know, I think the logic of the actual thing. At first, I was a bit like, "What?" And then the more I thought about it, I was like, the logic of the actual bloodline. I think somewhat. I still don't quite get the age thing, but it's basically it wipes out. You know, you have to wipe out the entire bloodline before the next person. Well, this is why it's taken almost 50 odd years for it to get through everyone. Okay. Even though it seems like, again, a bit of bullshit, because it's a bit like, so you're saying death can only do one at a time?
Yeah.
So death, how many people die?
Yeah.
Just killed like fucking like
that's it.
15 people just died. It's something like that, isn't it? It's like 20 people die every time you click your fingers or something.
Well, that's just like an African thing, isn't it?
That's an African thing, yeah, but I remember Liam Neeson was like clicking his fingers and be like, you're fucking killing them!
Stop killing them!
Stop doing that!
It was a joke about Bono, wasn't it? He's on stage and he's clicking his fingers and he says, you know, every 5 seconds a child dies in Africa, and somebody else was not fucking clicking your fingers there, you know? It's that thing, isn't it?
It is, but you know, there is you know, to this statistic, you know, across the world, things like that.
There's many.
But this is a weird way of that they are boxing in death in this like film, like they're boxing him down to being this like he can be trapped in this area, he can be stopped from this area. As long as you know where the wind is coming, you can stop him, and and as long as you've got this book, we can stop. And now it turns out that yes, William Bloodsworth is actually one of the early survivors of Final Destination style death, and this one, and he's actually present in the tower and things like that. Now, part of me, the one thing is, I guess, is the fact that I know that Tony Todd was dying when he was filming.
Yeah, it was
so he was already far along he knew he was going. So there's the way that in some way that I guess it's trying to find a way that they wanted to almost wrap up his story
and honor the character.
They wanted to honor the character. So I completely can respect it in that way. I think it somewhat changes the way that you'd look at him in the other ones, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just don't think the character's personality in the previous one matches up to this idea or this concept, of how that works. The idea that he's, just been waiting all this time, and I guess it just didn't feel like that in the performances because that was never planned. That was never the idea.
No, of course not.
But I can somewhat get along with that, and and the other thing, and as many people said, and I think a little bit of the love for this film is partially coming from this, is the fact that we do get a beautiful little Tony Todd where he basically talks to the camera and basically says goodbye to everyone. And it's a little, I think for certain fans, horror fans and stuff like that, it's an emotional little moment there. I think that people will cherish the idea that he got to have that final proper mainstream as well, not like a little he was in some random horror film that went straight to DVD and no one saw. In a proper mainstream, a franchise that he was still loved for, that outside of his Candyman and stuff like that.
And that's it. It felt like even with Candyman, it felt like it felt like he was able to bow out of the character almost.
Yeah.
So I understand it. I just don't think I liked it because I always liked the idea that William Bloodworth was this kind of odd character who turned up, and it was hinted at that maybe he is deaf, maybe he's he's an agent of death or something like that, because he effectively tells them the rules. He says about there's 2 ways to defeat it, which is obviously take another life, or he randomly name drops the woman from the second one. And it's just bring yourself back.
I guess it's the knowledge of someone who actually managed to defeat that, break the cycle. He's keeping a kind of track of all of this, and which is why he's been part of all of this, and so it's not that it's it couldn't happen, it wouldn't be possible. It just, I guess, it just generally just feels a bit out of place, and it goes against a lot of people's belief with the thing. It's a twist in there. I think I don't know. It's also weird because it just I don't know if it's just because you've got these characters, the way that it's there with all these characters stood around him as if for this person to listen to these kind of things and stuff like that. And because unlike the other ones, they listened to him because they were desperate, and here they are here with him, they want to know this kind of part. But I don't know, it's weird, because it resonates it's kind of just him with just these characters that kind of throw away for them, making it, it's that part that can be a bit it feels like it's used. If you think of it used in terms of a nice way of honouring and get rid of a character, it's lovely. If you think of it in terms of an actual twist in a film, it's not that great.
That's where I think I fall on it. I feel like I fall there. And then we get into this bit where they've mentioned that one of the brothers, Bobby, has an allergic reaction to peanuts and it can kill him. So Eric is kind of scheming that we're in a hospital anyway. Why don't we overdose you? Why don't we kill you?
Anaphylactic shock, and then I'll revive you. And he's like, we'll do this, and we'll set it up, and you can have nuts, and let's get you some out of the vending machine and this wonky vending machine, and They even have a little teaser earlier to Infer, which again I thought was I want to see where this is going. The revolving door is really teased when they go into it. It's got this real slow moment. It's got that thing. I was like, revolving door could be a really cool. Imagine someone getting scraped around it or things like that. I was like, that's really cool. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Where to go? I mean, that doesn't come up again, and it's I think it would have been slightly more interesting if I'm honest, because that again is like a common thing people do every day. This is definitely the one where I was just and this one and the one that comes towards the end are the ones where it's just this one not only pulls Eric into it, literally, but the whole vending machine and the MRI machine, to me, like, although it looks really cool, in the, when it kind of happens, it's really gory and it's really, brutal. It all feels, this one feels like one of those ideas where it was very much like they started with the idea of magnetism on an MRI machine before they thought whether it actually like fully needs to be like whether it's fully something that actually people are like, oh, I'm so scared of going towards an MRI machine.
Well, I don't know. I get the idea of it was going to be like frogs in a pot kind of thing where it's slowly building.
Yeah.
And as the two brothers are kind of arguing about doing it and preparing to do it, it's going to be building in the background, and we're supposed to, the Alfred Hitchcock taking bomb under the table. Yeah. We're supposed to be like, oh God, the MRI machine's growing. It's going to do something, and they're not aware. But I don't know. I just found it like I thought Eric's death was like brutal, but I don't think I found it particularly fun, and it felt like it kind of lost a lot of tension. It went on
for a really long time. I think there just does still. I think with these to work at times, like I mentioned before, is that like something I think that a lot of people like discount, and not everyone is as big a fan of the fifth one as I am. But the thing I think that was brilliant about the fifth one was that, like, I did say this in the spoiler free, is that it had such a sleight of hand. It had it plays with you, and it really played with you. It really, like, it puts something in there, like the glass at the beginning, early in this film. It had that little thing. It had lots of little things that kind of give you. This one, apart from having the vending machine, the idea that it might, I don't know, topple over, or they have the one spring, it's there, but everything else feels so much like the guys get into this room, which again, this is, it just pushes the boundary of, like, first it pushes the boundary of making sense, because you've got a receptionist there who's in a room, and they're in a room with a highly expensive machine where they wouldn't just let it go. The other thing is the fact that the machine can get that high without any kind of trigger or warning or major alarms going off to be like, fucking hell, this is going to cause a major... If it gets to the point when it can pull literally things across the room, then it should have something there. There's never really much mention of, like, it doesn't really build up to the idea of, like, everything is completely catastrophic with it. It just basically turns it on, and it just is allowed to keep slowly going higher and higher while they're there. And you're just kind of playing with, like, the Eric and Bobby and stuff, and at the same time Stephanie is, I don't know what I am the mum in the stuff. I'll admit the mum character, although there and they tried to have some emotional scenes, the mum just feels very underbaked to me. It feels that part of the film, and I don't know, I just found Stephanie a bit bland at times. I did just find, like, so that's another hard thing.
You don't Eric really was like the main character, and a lot of
Eric was the most interesting character by far. Like, he's around, it's more interesting. So he was what was saving a lot of these scenes. But the second he starts to make dumb decision after dumb decision, he again becomes a character you're like, oh, this is just, he's why are we still doing this kind of thing? And like, I feel like you could have done this a lot easier, but we've made this much more, again, complicated. But it's when it starts getting to that, he gets, his piercings and, like, thing, he gets pulled in and gets literally crushed into, the MRI. He gets smashed through with the actual chair of the, that he was going to ride Eric off in to try and save his life. And he gets pulled through it, and the pipes start going through his body, and he gets split apart. And it's a really cool, and it's one of the ones that I think actually was practical. It looked like it was a practical body ripping through. It's really fun, and he's a character that most people like. So again, it's like, damn. And he's not even meant to die, so he's got this kind of, for fucking with death, you fuck with death, you get fucked back. That's not quite the word, but
that's not quite how Mr. Bloodworth
you fuck with death, you fuck you right with friction. And then there's they finally, but it's this same kind of, it's this same thing of, although we say this is lots of different, when we've got the bloodline thing, and I like that one idea of the bloodline and that it keeps going afterwards, and and I can even settle with the idea that it takes that long, that it takes longer to do that it takes longer to pick it, people avoid it, they focus on different ones. That idea I think is okay, but the overall packaging around the idea with the book and the way that they go about finding it, the problem is, with that part being the premonitions, and then her going after him, and then being away, and then coming back after it, it still is literally, it's just a repackaged version, but it is still the same idea. She just happens to have lost them. She just happens to arrive just in time, just like every other Final.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Just in time for the spring to break up the machine and go through Bobby's head.
Yeah,
which again, and then he gets pulled into the thing, and it kind of whirls a little bit around his head. Which I felt, because it was such a build up, again, it's the throw off, everyone thinks that Eric's safe. I don't think I didn't feel that Eric was safe anyway.
No, of course not.
It didn't feel at all in that scene.
As soon as I saw the MRI go, and I was like, should the guy with loads of piercings be in this room? It's
weird. I don't know. I don't know why I wasn't so keen on this. Everything about it sounds like it should be. For me, it was more of that kind of, I just didn't feel that any of this, it felt like it pushed logic, and it didn't feel very I'm not scared about an MRI machine getting me.
I felt like there was like no sleight of hand. If you look at Iris's death, it felt bad because it was like as soon as she walks out, it's just illogical. She's saying, I kept myself away to make sure that everybody came safe, but death gave me cancer anyway. Just stay in there. You don't need to go out. You don't need to be like, oh, you're going to die eventually, but just so you believe it, I'll make sure you die sooner.
Yeah.
So that was nonsense.
She didn't try that with her kids.
No. Yeah.
She could have done it earlier. Just be like, fuck it, here you go.
Fuck it, do it.
Watch me die.
Howard's death, very Final Destination, sleight of hand. How's it going to happen? Who's going to be next? That kind of thing. Julia's death felt very Final Destination, but a bit of a bit of tongue in cheek. We think somebody else is going to get it, but somebody else gets the exact setup.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any sleight of hand. It was just the MRI machines going, and
a long wait,
and we are supposed to be like, oh, it's building. I felt like they wanted us to be like feeling the tension as it's climbing, but it just comes off like feeling wet. That's what
I think it's a long wait, and then you just end up with, I guess they think the payoff is the big graphic nature of Eric's death, really. But because he seems a bit of a tamer character, he gets a really violent one because he's a bit over, he's an overactive character. He's a bit more excitable, whereas Bobby is a bit more tame, so he gets a bit of a quick and less painless really death. He's dead before the thing screws through his head anyway. He's already gone, kind of thing. But it just like taking them both out and having that scene, it just felt like not a great deal. The payoff just wasn't enough for me there. I don't know. I just was a bit like tame on that
and
part.
I feel like it was the same when they get to the compound.
Oh, see now. So basically, from the scene, not only is the sleight of hand now gone, but again, we're returning to the compound, a part that I already thought really didn't work and didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And this all leads to this kind of the final death bit, and I just didn't feel all of these bits where they're like trying to get there. You've taken yourself to a place where you think that's the only safe place, and it turns out it's not. Which is like, well, everybody knew that, and it shouldn't have been anyway. It never should have been a safe place, because it doesn't make logical sense that there's an area that Death's like, nah, can't get this bit,
can't get over that fence.
Can't do that, I can't blow this out, I can't throw something at you, I can't do that now, I'm not going to be able to do that. So then, you get into this bit, and I just think there's something around when they go on that highway road trip, where it seems like it should be quite fun, and yet it all suddenly seems like we get to the exposition scenes.
Yeah.
Then we get drawn out scenes, and then we get this scene which still feels like a long drawn out of the idea that we've got to get into the house to protect ourselves. We've got to protect Mum, and Mum sacrifices herself nobly to say, I will stay in this house
I'll live in this
forever.
Cabin by myself.
I will go into this cabin, which I guess is again meant to seem like some big I'll do it. I'll stay in this room. I've only just come back to you, but
I'll go in that fully furnished cabin by myself.
Because we've seen people die together now, so we're good now, right?
Yeah.
That's how quickly this works. She's there, she gets them in the RV, they make up because they've seen people die after a little bit of friction from Iris. and that, and then obviously Death intervenes and we get the whole RV and she, crashes and the seatbelt jams, and the mum dies. Darlene dies by the things crushing down on her. It all comes very quickly. Charlie, manages to get out, and he manages to save her, and we get CPR, and she's brought back to life, and she's alive, and we've done it, and here we are, and we're very much trying to rip off Final Destination 2 here. Yeah. We're very much Final Destination 2. Again, this is repackaged of ideas for a new fan base. Will be fantastic.
Oh yeah.
For an old fan base, I do think a lot of people are going to be like, this is just an underwhelming Final Destination 2 in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, it resuscitates her. And the other thing, and it is a sticking point with the Final Destination franchise, is, and with several other films that can come with these kind of things, is if all of your characters die that you've just followed the entire film, does it make a film feel somewhat pointless in some ways? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which happens with that, but it doesn't happen as much as people think with Final Destination. Now, the original one, although it implies it's still going, does not necessarily definitely guarantee that he dies.
No.
They're still alive, and they've still somehow managed to get around it. It's come back around. Okay, so yeah, we assume that's going to keep going, but we don't see that happen. So it could still be taken many ways. The second one actually gives us a way around it, and this has now been led to, we can't think of another way, so we're just going to copy that exact way. So we're going to lead back to the same way. The third one.
The third is the train at the end.
So that is that, and that is that's probably the closest inspiration for what we kind of
probably
get here. Third, fourth, the fifth one again did a twist on it kind of thing. So they never survive it, but that one somewhat weirdly makes up for it because it feels like a whole circle moment, and that one felt like it was trying to somewhat bring a conclusion to.
Well, that made sense. I thought they were going to do
That one was also that one, by the way, was also clever because the whole film, you don't even realise is in a completely different timeline.
I didn't.
Until that film is actually technically becomes the first film in the franchise. Technically, now this has a moment that becomes the first film.
Yeah.
Partly, but
I thought they were going to do a Jeepers Creepers 3, or where basically because the whole thing, Charlie's been going on about high school graduation and prom. And I thought what was going to happen.
You're going to have to remind me, Jeepers Creepers 3, because
Jeepers Creepers 3 isn't the best of films. However, at the end, it's one of the best films of all time. However, it has a Final Destination-esque ending in where the main character gets, he finishes, he survives, and you're like, cool, story's wrapped up. He then gets on a bus. And it turns out that it's the bus from the second film, and he ends up dying in that. So what I thought was going to happen was Charlie, because we get this. One thing I did like is she drops Iris's penny from the book at the hospital when they're leaving, and an old lady picks it up, and then she comes back in and drops it, and it kind of goes down this stairs near where the sky tower was. And then it blocks this train track. So I like that it comes round. But what I thought was going to happen was Charlie and his sister were going to get on a bus, and it was going to be revealed that is the bus in the pilot of the second.
We thought we were going to go back round.
I thought we were going to go that
instead.
way. That they end up then being in the pilot of the second one. Because I thought they've already done that. It would make sense. But then,
I mean, I guess this film you can say plays on the fake out. The idea that that's something that happens, with Eric and stuff like that. It plays on the. It plays a lot of the fake out. I realised that they
mentioned Kim surviving in this one.
I
don't know how that worked, but at the time I was like, I wonder whether that's going to happen. It couldn't have happened. It could. Just don't acknowledge it.
It also establishes it's 57 years later.
Yeah.
So
just don't acknowledge it.
Don't acknowledge it. Doesn't make sense.
Well, so they die in the accident. The person who inspired how they survived.
And that's when the time tunnel arrived, they went through time back just to kill that one girl.
That's how it all comes.
And that's how it comes around.
Yeah, but instead we get the exact thing that we were talking about before we recorded, where it's Charlie's graduation. He's going for prom, and his the siblings are good friends now. They've made up. And they say to somebody, she drowned a couple of weeks ago, and I brought him back. And we were like, if somebody said that to you, you just leave it. But instead, this guy's like, oh, cool. But you didn't die then, The biggest fucking dickhead thing you could say in that situation,
Yeah, literally to point that out in that way. Well, you didn't die there, that's a bit of a, okay, cheers. But yeah,
you did. And then they realised, oh, fuck, we're cooked.
Yeah, and we hear all the crashing in the train, and then they literally get splattered across the thing. So again, it's an established way in the Final Destination franchise where, this is, basically that's it. There's no way to defeat it, basically. Yeah. Death is a natural thing, and it is. I guess it's true. Like, death is a natural thing. It's just, I guess, the fact that I think out of the ones in the franchise, I prefer the ones when they actually try to come up with at least an interesting twist on how to do that. Technically, the twist here is that it's all a fake out, and she thought she's doing a Final Destination 2, but she's actually doing more of a Final Destination 3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Even Final Destination 3, I think we end with a premonition, and then they go back just before. Yeah. And they leave it, I'm sure they leave it ominous.
Has an additional premonition at the end. So technically it still turns out, but then it gives the sound of a train crashing after the credits go out.
It
so
does.
You assume it is.
But I'm
but then it has a banging thing of Love Train.
Yeah, but I feel like it's ominous that whether they get off or not.
Yeah. So it goes back around that there's a second kind of
potentially. Yeah, you never escape.
You've got another case, and and it is mentioned also the Final Destination 5 twist of like you can kill someone. That is mentioned in Bloodworth that you can kill someone to take their lives and stuff like that. To be fair, there is that one funny scene
with the babies. That's hilarious. No, we can't do
this. We can't do this. Again, Eric kind of bringing the some of the better scenes to the film. So it's weird to say because we've talked about it in that way, and I feel like we've almost established that there's like a half working and a half not working. As in, a lot of the stuff that involves the exposition of Stephanie and Iris. A lot of that stuff is mainly kind of that kind of the crap stuff. The deaths mainly work and are fun. It does just feel that they are surrounded by a lot of things that really, for me, did not have the smoothness of pretty much majority of the other films. Of feeling quite. We don't need to over explain all of this. We can actually just enjoy the ride of the deaths, kind of thing. We don't need to overcomplicate it. For me, as much as all this big CGI ending, with the trains and stuff, okay, cool, they're squashing stuff like that. It felt like a little just tacked on. Yeah, it felt like it was like a little bit like of who would actually say that, and here we are, big smash, they're dead, and it's hard sometimes with these, like when you've got that. I especially think after the fifth one where it felt like it, although it killed them, it brought them back around. And also the idea in that one is the idea that they thought that they had survived because they'd killed someone. Well, not killed someone, but they'd by not meaning to, but they took someone else's life. But what they didn't realise is they were already on borrowed time of that person. So it depends how long they lived for. So again, all those little things made it seem quite clever. And I guess it's just a weird ad to be like, yes, this is the new thing, but when people are touting so much about it being this new concept and this new idea, it's hard not to feel a little bit like, but there's actually, apart from that one title name, the Bloodline. Yeah. The Bloodline bit is the only thing really that everything else is just repackaged and a bit more over-explained. Yeah. it becomes a bit long-winded after a while. The second half of this film, or the third act of this film, is it is a bit of a boring retread. It just doesn't feel that it really it didn't feel fun. Earlier in the film at least felt a bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit fun. We've got a new interesting idea, but every time we had to explain like why this happened or who this did or why this actually all links back to William Bloodworth as well, and all those things, and the random unfleshed idea of the book and the actual premonitions, it all just started to feel after a while a little bit like underbaked. Like they had an idea. And I can't help. It's still, the cabin pisses me off. Yeah, it just doesn't make any logical sense. That was just the thing. And even when Claire did it in Final Destination 2, it's like, at least I can understand why that might be a protective place.
Yeah, that
and
makes
the precautions he goes to.
Yeah.
You know. But the just Irish, the older Irish part, the younger Irish part's great. The older Irish part, Irish part makes I just think is one of the major flaws in the thing. They had a cool idea. I just don't think they fleshed it out enough. And even I said in the last one, I think the idea of the first responder thing actually sounded quite interesting. Of like people who deal with death every day and how would they react to the idea? Like, are they still just going to do it? Are they still just going to have it? You know, is that actually going to stop them in that way? Like, there's an interesting concept there to make it. And I feel like this one starts with an interesting concept, but never fully builds the emotional resonance to make me care enough about the family. So they still just feel like cannon fodder, like some of the other sequels. They still feel like throwaway people that we're going to get. So what this one should have really built is that emotional, like, oh my god, the family. And it never
really kind of fleshes it out enough.
No, you know? the opening scene fleshes the two characters out better than the later scene, who we get more time with. You feel more emotional for them in the opening scene than you do on the characters you spend a lot more screen time with, I'd say.
Yeah.
You know, outside of Eric, and Eric is because he's the character that you love because he's snarky and sarcastic, and then he like makes humorous jokes. So you're like that. He's like the Randy, you know. You feel sorry that he dies because you're like, fuck.
Because he's a good character.
I just spoiled Scream 2 for everyone.
In case
That's
you
not
haven't
too
watched
bad,
it,
but this is a spoiler episode.
I don't know. I kind of felt like it ended up being a very messy film.
Yeah, we said it. We did say in the spoiler free, and after a week of reflection, I can reflect on a few things working better than they did. And I don't think it's a bad film. I think I'm sure lots of people have a lot of fun in the cinema. Definitely. Don't think out of all of them it's going to like. I hope I watch it again and I'm like, actually, you know what? It's not like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, there just feels like there's glaring plot holes that. You know, there are things you can ignore in Final Destination, and then there are things that just start to feel a little bit like silly and a bit like take us out of it.
Which is an odd thing to say when you're talking about Final Destination.
Yes, that's what I mean. Like,
this is a bit silly. But no, I agree. I feel like
I still only rank it above the fourth one.
Well, we did that ranking. And I think the fourth one is it's just a pretty bad, boring film all around. Whereas
that one's bland and has some bland kills and very few like really interesting ones. At least this has interesting deaths.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. This does have its moments. It just feels a bit unfortunate, really. You know.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
No, I think I'm good. I think we've done plenty on the spoiler. We've told you all the dirty deets.
Well, there you go. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. If you've watched Final Destination Bloodlines, come and let us know your thoughts. Whether you think it's... I can't even think of some shit for this. It's I'm sure somebody could, you know, so just let us know your thoughts on the film. Hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. We will see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.